wise-loving viewers. Welcome to today's Science and Spirituality program on Supreme Master Television, the first in a two-part series featuring visionary, best-selling author and a leading figure in the field of science and spirituality, Gragg Braden, whose work blends the profound wisdom of the ancients with modern discoveries in genetics and quantum physics. Through this unity, Mr. Braden believes that both inner and outer peace may be achieved. Mr. Braden was born in the state of Missouri, USA, and during his childhood, his family moved around frequently, exposing young Gregg to a variety of religious traditions. Before beginning his current pursuits, Mr. Braden held a variety of computer-related positions and helped to build a team within a prominent company whose members assure the reliability of the Internet. Let's now learn more from Gragg Braden about his background, which played a pivotal role in his search for understanding.
I was not really steeped in any one specific tradition. So I was introduced into the Hindu traditions, into the Muslim traditions, into the Hebrew traditions, and I'm just as comfortable in a mosque or a cathedral as I am in a synagogue or a Native American kiva. And I think it was good for me to have that experience because it opened the door to many possibilities. And what I found was that while all the traditions described a piece of the questions I had, I found no single tradition that described the answer to all my questions. I looked, I couldn't find one that did. And so I began to ask myself, as a child, could it be that they're all parts of a greater knowing? And if it is, what would that look like?
To Mr. Braden, the idea that science and spirituality are symbiotic has long been a natural assumption.
But I had a belief personally, and I assumed everyone had the same belief. And my belief was simply this: I believed that there is no difference between science and spirituality, even as a child. So I believe that when I studied astronomy and biology and geology and physics and chemistry, I thought that's just the name that we give to the study, but ultimately what I was doing was I was understanding the mechanism of a higher power, the inner workings of nature, and the intelligence that I believe underlies all experience.
It was his search to comprehend what contemporary knowledge couldn't explain that led Gragg Braden on a 22-year pilgrimage to some of the world's most remote and sacred places.
So my path as an adult, I've spent the bulk of my adult life searching for the places that have been least disturbed by the modern world. My thinking has been that if I could find places that were least disturbed by the technology and the thinking of the modern world, perhaps I would find bits and pieces of the ancient knowledge that was lost more intact. Ancient knowledge, but not obsolete knowledge. The principles are powerful. Now maybe the way we describe it is not scientific, but the principles are powerful and they're valid. So that journey has led me into some of the most isolated and remote and pristine and beautiful places remaining on this planet today. Monasteries in the Himalayas of China, Tibet, Nepal, Bolivia, Peru, all through India, into the American desert Southwest and the Aboriginal traditions of Australia. And although all of the traditions are very different from one another, there's a common theme that links them together, and that theme, I think, is probably what brings us into this room today. And the theme first says that we are all part of this world, not separate from this world, that we are part of a living system, and that we are much more empowered beings than we've been led to believe in the modern world, that we have much greater opportunity to influence, not control, not manipulate, not impose our will, but influence what happens in our bodies, what happens in our lives, and ultimately what happens in our world.
Mr. Braden believes that we are on the cusp of a new era and that we all have an opportunity to participate in creating a bright future. His research and work have focused on helping humanity achieve the goal of a planet where only peace and love are known.
I firmly believe that we are living a pivotal moment in the history of this planet. Almost universally, ancient texts and traditions have told us that we will experience something extraordinary in our lifetimes, in our world, in our civilization, and in our bodies. So my path has been to first understand what our ancestors knew that we may have forgotten. Secondly, to marry that with the best science of our time into something that's meaningful in our lives in the modern world. And then thirdly, to find ways to apply that in our lives and in ways that we can embrace in our living room, even if we're not scientists, that we can embrace with our communities and our families and our children, ultimately to help us to become better people and create a better world.
When we return, Gregg Braden will speak about the secret divine pattern that he says lies hidden in the genetic code of all life on Earth. Please stay tuned to Supreme Master Television. Welcome back to Science and Spirituality, where we're having an enlightening discussion with scientist and best-selling author Gregg Braden of the USA. When he first began studying human origins, Mr. Braden wondered whether humankind was just a genetic coincidence or was intentionally engineered. Let's now find out how his research took shape.
I don't know who or what or how, but the evidence is overwhelming that there is an intentionality and a design that underlies our existence. So as a scientist, my thinking was, if that's true, who or whatever put us here on Earth would have left something inside of every one of us that tells us we're part of a greater existence and tells us that we're a family and that we're not so different from one another. And if I could find that, if I could find that common denominator, that somehow maybe it would help us to become greater than the differences, that began a search. And I combined the science that I know of biology and history and ancient language, linguistics, genetics, with the new science of computers that were now on my desktop. And Daryl, I'll tell you, I remember the very first time as a scientist that I had the opportunity to see the human genome, a piece of human DNA coded on my computer screen. And all the CTAG, it all rolled down through the screen. And my brain looked at that. And I remember thinking, I said, I don't know what that says, but there's a code. There's a language. That DNA is a language. And whatever that language is, it's inside of me, and it's inside of everyone that looks at it. And some intelligent being placed it there a long time ago.
Using all the technology at his disposal, Mr. Braden then began searching for the message encoded in our DNA.
And this led to a research project using computers, the best science of today, and some of those ancient texts. And the bottom line is that what we discovered is every single ancient language, the letters of the language link to very precise numbers that have never changed. So whether we're talking about the Arabic language or the Hebrew language, or if we're talking about cuneiform and Sanskrit, what are called the ancient core or the ancient root languages, there's a mysterious number that's always been linked to those letters, and nobody knows where the numbers came from. That was interesting to me. So through a process that took many years, I came to understand that the numbers that represent the letter are also the numbers that represent the elements, what we call the elements on the periodic table of life and a physical reality as we know it. So in other words, it is if the ancients, they didn't know about the periodic table of elements the way we do today, but they knew about the numbers that were represented. And when we make the connections between the letters of the ancient alphabets, the numbers they represent, those numbers, if we look at them on the periodic table, they happen to be precisely the elements that make the DNA in our bodies. Now, we had the ability to take the sequences of DNA in a cell and through those numbers link them to letters in ancient alphabets. And lo and behold, the letters spell words and the words have meaning. And this has led to a book that's entitled The God Code. It was released in the year 2004. What we know is that there is a message, an intentional message within the DNA of all life. The message occurs in layers, and each layer has its own code that must be understood for that layer. And I'm still working on the deeper layers.
Gregg Braden says the message hidden in the DNA of all living beings is that which spiritual masters have tried to convey to humanity through the ages. He now reveals what's written in the topmost layer of our genetic code.
The top layer is one that we understand very well right now. The top layer in the DNA of all life literally translates into the words God eternal within the body. God eternal within the body. We don't know who put that message there. We don't know exactly why it's there. But I can tell you that all I did was I followed the instructions in a series of ancient texts following those languages, and I married that with the science of today, and this is what we found. If a higher intelligence is responsible for our existence, and that intelligence created us, it makes perfect sense that that intelligence would have left something for us to understand who we are. And if they left it in a temple or a text that could be destroyed or disappear over time, it wouldn't make sense. It makes perfect sense that that higher intelligence would have left the message encoded into the creation itself. And as long as the creation exists, the message is intact.
Our appreciation, Mr. Gregg Braden, for sharing your time and invaluable wisdom with us. As all creation is connected and has God within, as is further proven by your discovery, may we always remember to treat each and every being with love and kindness. For more details on Gregg Braden, please visit www.greggbraden.com. Books and other media by Mr. Braden are available at the same website. Thank you for your presence today on our program. Please join us again next Monday on Science and Spirituality when Mr. Braden will discuss what he calls the group heart coherent response in part 2 of our interview with him. Coming up next is Words of Wisdom after Noteworthy News. Let the light of heaven forever touch all of us.
For more details, please visit www.suprememastertv.com/SS.
Warm-hearted viewers, welcome to today's Science and Spirituality program on Supreme Master Television, the second in a two-part series featuring visionary best-selling author and a leading figure in the field of science and spirituality, Gregg Braden, whose work blends the profound wisdom of the ancients with modern discoveries in genetics and quantum physics. Through this unity, Mr. Braden believes that both inner and outer peace may be achieved. Before beginning his current pursuits, Mr. Braden held a variety of computer-related positions and helped to build a team within a prominent company whose members assure the reliability of the Internet. For the past 22 years, Mr. Braden has traveled to some of the world's most sacred and inaccessible places in search of ancient spiritual wisdom, from temples in the Himalayas to ancient ruins in Bolivia and Peru. On last week's episode, he described his discovery of a secret message encoded in the DNA of all living beings, God eternal within the body. Today on Science and Spirituality, we'll talk with Mr. Braden about what our shared spiritual heritage has to offer modern science.
There is a wisdom that has been preserved by indigenous people of our world. They use a different language. It's not the language of science, because science is a new language. Science has only been here for about 300 years, since the time of Isaac Newton. But there's another language that's been here for thousands of years that answers some of our deepest questions. Who are we? Where do we come from? Why are we here? And what can we achieve? And that language is preserved in the traditions of these people who are disappearing from the world today. And I think it behooves us to honor our past and to honor those traditions. Are they old? Absolutely, they're old, but they're not obsolete. The principles are very, very valid. And I think they're the very principles that are missing in the scientific traditions that have prevented science from answering the questions.
Mr. Braden believes that the world's spiritual traditions hold the keys to solving some of the most complex issues dealt with in science today, including the unified field theory.
So as good as our science is, for example, there's a search for what is called the unified field theory. Scientists are struggling to find a formula that links and marries all of the forces of nature into a single theory that describes gravity and all of the forces, the quantum forces, and brings everything together. But I think there's a fundamental mistake that was made in science. And there are new experiments today that are about to tell us about that mistake. The new superconducting supercollider, for example, on the border between Switzerland and France. The largest, most complex piece of machinery ever built by humankind is about to recreate the first moments of the Big Bang, the first moments of creation as we understand it. If certain particles do not appear in those first moments, and specifically they're looking for something called a Higgs particle. If those particles don't appear, it suggests that the way we think of physics today is incorrect, and means we have to go back to the drawing board and start all over again, which may be a good thing, or we could simply start from the principles of our spiritual traditions that tell us what's missing, and the key is that consciousness has been written out of the equation of the universe. That means that we are written out of the equation of the universe. It means that we are considered as separate from, rather than part of, our world. The piece that I think is missing from the unified field theory is just that, it's consciousness. When we write us in consciousness into the theories of the universe, then I think we'll be on the track where we can answer the questions. And this experiment at the CERN Super Collider, there are implications. Textbooks may have to be rewritten. Our theories may have to be retaught. But I think it might be a good thing, because then it would put us on the right track where we can answer the question, who are we? Once we truly understand our nature in this universe, then I think the choices become clear and the opportunities become obvious. And that's where our empowerment, I believe, really begins. And it brings us full circle to the beginning of this conversation and our most cherished and ancient spiritual traditions, because they tell us we are powerful beings in this universe, that we're here as a result of a divine intervention, not necessarily religious, but the intervention of a greater existence. And that when we embrace that possibility and apply it into our lives, that we become healthy, happy, empowered beings, and that we have a world of peace and cooperation that allows us to achieve, as a species, things that seem like science fiction to us and imaginary. But I mean, what could we achieve? How far could we go if we work together and apply brilliant minds and beautiful hearts together? And I think we're about to find out, because of where we are in the history of our planet right now.
After this brief message, we'll learn about the true power of the human heart. Please stay tuned to Supreme Master Television. Welcome back to Science and Spirituality, where we're speaking with Gregg Braden, a thoughtful and engaging scientist and best-selling author from the USA. Whether it's from ancient holy scriptures or spiritual teachers, we're told that all beings are one. Now modern science is confirming this universal truth, which the great seers have taught since the dawn of humanity.
What our own science now is showing us is that we are connected in many different ways. We are connected through quantum fields that are now acknowledged in peer-reviewed journals. And scientists acknowledge in those journals that when we focus our attention on quantum particles, the very particles that we're made of, we change those particles. So that's a fact. The question is, to what degree do we influence those particles? Okay, so this is on the quantum level. Now there's another level. The magnetic fields of this planet, the magnetic fields of the Earth, connect all life and sustain all life, from a blade of grass to a hamster and goldfish and every leader of every nation, every CEO of every corporation. We are linked and connected through a very powerful magnetic field that also connects us to the Earth and connects us beyond our world.
Venus, which is considered by many to be Earth's twin, as it is similar in size, mass, and composition, has no appreciable magnetic fields. Similarly, Mars has only traces of such fields. This is one indication that the presence of magnetic fields on Earth is very special, and even every being on our planet creates these fields.
In 2006, peer-reviewed journals, medical journals, released the studies that amazed everyone because they found that the human heart is the strongest generator of magnetic fields in the body, 5,000 times stronger than the brain, the strongest electrical field, 100 times stronger than the brain, and that we create what is called coherence between the heart and the brain, which optimizes this conversation between the heart and the brain by having a feeling, and the feeling is what the spiritual traditions have always taught us about. When we can have the feeling in our heart, that feeling is what triggers a signal between our heart and our brain that literally connects us with our world in ways that we're only beginning to understand.
Scientists have demonstrated that each individual's generation of magnetic fields is hugely significant when measured on a global scale, and Mr. Braden now provides a powerful example.
There are two satellites that are positioned over North America right now. They're called stationary or geosynchronous satellites. One is on the East Coast, one's on the West Coast. Every 30 minutes, those satellites send a signal back to the Earth, and their job is to tell us how strong are the magnetic fields of the planet. And every day, those fields ebb and they flow. They rise and they fall. In a 24-hour cycle, you can watch the fields rise and fall. And scientists are used to seeing that. So one day, scientists are looking at the data and they see the rise, the fall, the rise, and the fall, and all of a sudden they see a spike. It goes right off the chart. And the scientists are saying, well, what on earth? What on earth literally is happening to create this spike in the fields? Well, they overlaid it onto a calendar of days, and to their amazement, the spike began at 9 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time on September 11th, 2001. It was the human emotional response of millions of people in a compressed window of time that was so powerful. The heart-based response, the electrical field and the magnetic field of the human heart, so many hearts feeling to such intensity in such a compressed window of time was so strong it actually created a spike in the very fields of the Earth that sustain and connect all life. And scientists said, oh my God. They said, we really are connected and part of a living system in ways that we're only beginning to understand. And this gives new meaning to the concept of Gaia. Gaia is a living system, that we are part of this living system. We're not separate from it. That has led to a series of studies and now a project the first of its kind, the very first science-based initiative that is designed to teach people how to feel the feelings in their hearts, not think them in their minds, but to create feelings in their hearts that trigger the coherence that creates good health for us inside, but also extends into the world around us and creates this coherent field carried through the magnetic fields of the earth.
Again, science is confirming what many time-honored spiritual paths and religions have taught. If humanity creates more peaceful and compassionate thoughts, then we can bring about an atmosphere of healing and light.
Scientists tell us that the way we generate those feelings is by following the principles of these cherished and ancient spiritual traditions, by moving into our hearts and feeling feelings of gratitude, appreciation, care. Care is a really big one. Compassion. Those kinds of feelings in the English language trigger the heart-based response that sends the signals to the brain and tells the brain that we are living in a caring, peaceful world. And with those signals, the brain says, I will send now the chemistry into the body that matches those feelings.
The power of humankind to transform our planet's collective consciousness is enormous. By building shared constructive energy through benevolent thoughts, kind intentions, and righteous actions, we can make a splendid change in our world right away. Thank you, Gregg Braden, for bringing this message of hope to the public, and we wish you the very best in your continued research that is affirming the harmony of science and spirituality. For more details on Gregg Braden, please visit www.greggbraden.com. Books and other media by Mr. Braden are available at the same website. Thank you, friendly viewers, for your company today on our program. Coming up next is Words of Wisdom after Noteworthy News. May we all follow in the footsteps of the wise spiritual teachers who have sustained our planet throughout the ages.
For more details, please visit www.suprememastertv.com/SS.